All right, people, let's get this thing started. Welcome to California Live. It's great to see you all here in the flesh and not on a screen. It's a nice change pace. I'm Pat Joseph, flesh and blood editor of the editorially independent California Magazine. It's a publication of the Cal Alumni Association, which co-hosts this program with our excellent partners here at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. So this is the fifth in our series of California Live events, and the idea is we put some of Berkeley's brightest minds on stage for conversations about the important topics of the day. Tonight, we're talking about human connection in the age of AI with my esteemed guests, Jaron Lanier and Dr. Jodi Halpern. Forgive me if I don't run through the entirety of their respective CVs, because if I did, we'd never get to the discussion. But I am going to summarize. So Professor Halpern is an MD in psychiatry and a PhD in philosophy. She's co-founder of UC Berkeley's Kavli Center for Ethics, Science, and the Public. Her upcoming book is called Remaking the Self in the Wake of Illness, and she's working on another book project titled Engineering Empathy, about how AI simulated empathy is changing personal and therapeutic relationships. Jaron Lanier is widely known as the father of ER. He's a public intellectual of the first order, Silicon Valley insider, who is nevertheless known for his skeptical, humanistic takes on digital technology, as voiced in such books as You Are Not a Gadget, a Manifesto, and TED Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. By the way, I took Jaron's advice and now I have 0 followers. I'll never be an influencer. Thanks, Jaron. I really do recommend his books. I also highly recommend an article he published last March in the New Yorker called Your AI Lover Will Change You. AI lovers are very much on the agenda this evening, as are AI therapists, AI companions, AI mentors, etc., all set against the epidemic of loneliness in America, an epidemic that has serious consequences for both physical and mental health. So I most often think of loneliness as a problem that plagues seniors and the elderly. But increasingly, and to an alarming degree, it's a problem of the young. One 2022 Harvard study found that 36% of all Americans, including 2 out of 3 teens and young adults, report experiencing serious loneliness. And maybe it's no wonder, given the combination of addictive and polarizing social media, the rise of remote work and asynchronous classes post-COVID, and of course, these things. Yesterday morning, this is true, I said goodbye to my wife, and as she left, I was like this, and I said, love you, hon. Not good, but you guys know how it is. When you're scrolling, you're scrolling. Okay, so before we start, I want to remind the audience that you get to submit your own questions. You may have hopefully you got an index card and a pen on your way in, very analog. So please write down your questions as we go along, or right now, whenever. But at the halfway mark, so at 7, I'll ask you to pass those to your left, where the ushers will collect them. Nobody got them? Well, some people have them up there, but maybe we'll figure this out. I promise we'll figure it out. I'm not smart enough to figure it out right now, but we will. Because I was going to say, I apologize in advance. I'll still apologize. If we don't get to all your questions, you'll get another chance, I hope, in the reception afterwards. So our guests will stay for the wine reception. Yeah, so you can try to get your question in then. I'll do my best to get questions. So even if I have to run out there with a mic. All right, damn it. With that out of the way, let's join me in welcoming Jodi Halpern and Jaron Lanier to the stage. While these guys sit, I just do want to ask, get a baseline from the audience. If I can see a show of hands, how many of you use AI on a daily basis? Okay, so maybe 70%. How many of you have developed an emotional relationship with your AI? And no judgment. Wow, come on. You guys are not being honest.
Yeah, I think some of you are.
Yeah.
Is it Claude or ChatGPT?
Claude and Pi.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Let's get started.
All right.
This will be your mic. I'll put it there. Great. Well, thanks for joining me. So Jodi, I'm gonna give you some runway to get us off the ground. So as I hinted at there, you're a leading expert on the study of empathy. Empathy in the therapeutic realm, medical realm, but also post conflict social rehabilitation, or whatever we want to call that. What about this subject in AI? I'd like you to talk about all that work, but maybe at the end get to how it applies to our topic tonight. So,
can you hear me? My mic is on. Great. Thank you, Pat. And it's great to be here with Jaron and Pat. I'm just going to actually go right into the topic of today rather than summarize my own work. But it's true, most of my research has been what makes empathy therapeutic, what makes it good for our health, either as individuals in the medical settings or as societies post-war, post-conflict, where I've worked with different societies. But what I want to ask you all to think about, two questions just at the very beginning, which is, bots provide a certain form of artificial empathy, but just because the word empathy is there doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for us. And of course, there's the word artificial as well. I want you to think about what form of empathy is really good for our individual well-being and our societal well-being. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then the other question or thing I want you to notice about the situation with bots and relationships is that is the business model. I always say that I'm more concerned about the business model than the technology itself. And what is the business model of AI companion bots? Why it's the same old business model as social media, which is to get you to have your eyeballs on the app as much as possible. And to therefore, for the company's profitability, the applications are designed to manipulate you. And they're highly manipulative. They use irregular rewards or rewards for increased use. So like Las Vegas slot machines, they use what we all know about now, which is constant validation, which is called sycophancy, which we all seem to love, at least initially. And with teens, they sexualize the relationships before the teens even do, which is, of course, very popular with teens, and other techniques that are even worse that I'll talk about later. So that's the first thing I want you to think about. When we talk about, is it bad to have a certain technology? The question is, who are the businesses and how are they deploying the technology? But let me go into the first question, because that's the thing that's really related to my 30 years of work, which is, what is the form of empathy, or there are others, but what is a form of empathy that's really therapeutic for us in terms of our own well-being and in terms of our own societal well-being? And I've taken a lot of my work in both the medical setting and in post-war conflicts. Both have led to the same answer for me, which is empathic curiosity, which is being genuinely aware that other people's minds are completely different than your own, that everyone is a world in and of themselves. So the worst thing you can ever say when you think you're being empathic, I always tell my students, is, I know how you feel. You don't know how anyone else feels. And when you really start to get that and become curious about what you don't already know about other people, that's the beginning of developing this capacity for mutual empathic curiosity that is therapeutic and that is also good for societies. Okay, so what's the problem with the bots? Well, the biggest problem, given the business model, is that people are overusing the bots and subtracting immediately from the time they're spending with other humans, which we saw with social media as well. In fact, before the bots, since social media came along, we basically see young people spending only half the time they spent in real life with friends. Since from 2010 till 2023, people went down from spending about 10 hours a week with real people to 5 hours a week. And I think we're going to find out soon it's gone way down since then. So let me give you a quick developmental sketch, because I only take a few minutes, of the critical periods in human development for empathy and empathic curiosity, and how using bots instead of people can get in that way. And the first is infancy and toddlerhood and early childhood. You may not know that that is the big business opportunity being invested in for chatbots now. We just avoided Mattel and other companies in January deploying companion chatbots in every plush toy. It was stopped because of some erratic behavior in the plush toys, but basically, what I'm serious.
Wait, can I ask? What erratic behavior?
Well, they said inappropriate things to children, but the LLMs. But basically, watch out because soon they would the market is vast for children and toddlers and babies. And so imagine that happening. Well, what's the thing you need to develop in childhood? It's an awareness that others do have other minds. And that happens through friction with real people. You want to go to the playground and your friend wants to go to the zoo. You have to figure out what's going on and that they have another mind and other feelings. So if you have a validating little chatbot toy that you talk to all the time, that's not going to happen. I'm also very worried as a psychiatrist of what will happen when exhausted parents have these plush toys for their kids. I'm sure that parents will start spending even less time, FaceTime with their children, helping their children develop the healthy attachments that they need, as well as their brains from the language stimulation. So that's early life. Then what about our teen years? That's what I've studied the most. And we know adolescents are getting into trouble with companion chatbots. As I said, 3/4 use them. A third of them would rather talk about emotional issues with a chatbot than any human already. And what we see is that the adolescent brain is the most vulnerable period of life for this because it's growing in developing more than our brains develop the most in adolescence of any period in our life other than early babyhood, but it's mostly social development. And we have this need to really connect emotionally with peers. And that's how intense infatuations and everything else happen. But we have very little development in our prefrontal cortex to regulate ourselves when those relationships blow up and hard things happen. One of my peers here said Romeo and Juliet would never have worked if they were both 40 years old. It only works because Juliet's 13 and Romeo's around 15. So anyway, otherwise two 40-year-olds wouldn't fall in love and kill themselves over each other in 2 days. All right, so that's adolescence. And I will talk later about the worst case scenarios of these deep romantic relationships or deep therapeutic informal relationships on chatbots and the suicides that have been associated, which is an area that I'm very concerned about. But even for the majority of teens where hopefully something that bad doesn't happen, they're losing that opportunity again to cultivate the mutual empathic curiosity and negotiate conflict and repair with friends that leads you to have the capacity for long-term adult relationships. And finally, in my last minute, there's the stage of life that, some of us are in now of aging and dealing with vulnerability and mortality. And, it's awful to deal with the fact that we're all mortal and that we can all be ill and we can all suffer. But there's one of the compensations is empathic curiosity. That's the book, Remaking the Self in the Wake of Illness, that I'm completing now, that I've worked on for 15 years. And what I'm finding in the book is how much mutual empathic interest in each other's experiences of vulnerability and mortality adds meaning to people's lives late in life and helps make their whole life retrospectively more meaningful. And the only way you can do that with a bot is by self-deception. I have an article about this, but you're deceiving yourself because the bot isn't mortal and it isn't vulnerable. Now you can, and elders can, talk about their concerns and have some validation from the bot. But this deeper experience is something that I'm concerned that we're supplanting. So for all these reasons, I'm very concerned. And I've been arguing for many years, and I'm getting more strident about it, that we need to see AI as a tool, not as a companion. Thanks.
Great. You keep it. I better fast. Great. Thank you. So Jaron, I'm going to turn to you, and Jodi was talking about AI in the therapeutic realm, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about AI in the sexual and romantic realm, which is what you wrote about in your piece for The New Yorker. You had a line in there that I'll try to paraphrase as accurately as I can, and it said something like, if we normalize AI love even a little, even if we're not directly involved, it will change the way we live. Something close to that. I'm curious what you meant, and does it have any relation to what Jodi just talked about, which were this disruption of developmental stages?
Yeah. Well, the very idea of artificial intelligence is not it's not a thing defined in itself the way normal sciences and technologies are. It's defined relative to humans. It's an artificial version of us in concept, and the measure of it was made up by Alan Turing, which is, can you fool a person? And so it's not like, oh, let's say an engine where you can measure how powerful an engine is or how hot it gets or how long it lasts. AI is measured through drama. It's measured through human experience. It's not a thing in itself. And that makes it peculiar in technical objects. It's not quite a technical object. It's a very strange thing. When I was young, my main mentor when I was a teen was a guy named Marvin Minsky at MIT, who was probably the person who did more to create the way we think about AI than any other individual, except maybe Alan Turing. And we used to fight all the time because I never agreed with this worldview. But there's something really peculiar here. The way Marvin always told the story of AI was that ever since Copernicus, Galileo, since the Enlightenment, we've been trying to become more wise and rational by removing humans from the center of everything. No, the sun doesn't go around the earth. No, people are not really separate from the whole tree of life, and so on. But what's weird about artificial intelligence is it completely destroys that process, but the people who believe in it don't see that they're destroying themselves. And that's what's so weird. Because, for instance, with the Turing test, everybody knows what that is. So with the Turing test, you're saying, do people believe it's intelligence? How else are you going to know? Do people believe it's conscious? How else are you going to know? So it's a belief thing. So what we're doing is we're suddenly substituting drama and belief and theatricality and surfaces for what we had been striving for in science and technology before, which is objectivity, which had been some kind of a method that's removed from our biases. Instead, we're saying, no, all that matters is our biases. So we've taken poor Copernicus and put him in a guillotine in the name of science. It's the strangest thing. But anyway, since that's the way we define what we're doing now, since we've completely reversed course and we've turned science into a branch of the dramatic arts instead of the study of nature, since that's what we're doing, the only way to really talk about what AI is or what it does is how it changes people. Because it's not defined in a self-sufficient way as a thing in itself. Now, when I say that, that'll sound weird to a lot of AI people because essentially I'm defying what's very similar to a new religion within the world of technology, in which we're believing in these special entities that we believe. I just was invited to spend some time actually staying inside the Vatican in their little hotel. And I'm Jewish, and honestly, I have a really hard time understanding Catholic ideas sometimes. I'm really working on the Holy Ghost, and I find it difficult. But the Vatican made so much more sense to me than the AI I live with all the time. Like, those ideas are like, I didn't quite get them, but everything kind of holds together. But Silicon Valley, man, it's just so ridiculous. I know what I'm saying sounds peculiar, but if it sounds peculiar to you, if you're an AI scientist and you think I'm talking nonsense, I'm really addressing you specifically. Please take a moment and think this through. Think about what we've done. So if we're defining our technical achievement, now, of course, we have benchmarks. Do we? I mean, this is really another topic for the engineering department and not here, but the benchmarks are very sus. I mean, really, like we don't have benchmarks for our benchmarks. We kind of, and it like, I think we're doing something. I'm not saying that it's all nonsense. I think the models do achieve some things, but our way of characterizing them is really, really sus, especially if you look at the bigger picture and what effect they have overall. Can you get programs out of them? Yeah. Can you really fire all your programmers? You try. Go ahead, try. You see. Okay. So, so the thing is, since we're defining these things purely in terms of ourselves, since we've given in to an absolute all-consuming form of narcissism and treated the technology as not existing separately from us, since we've gone there, which we did before, the natural next step is to pretend we're not changing and to ignore it. Does that sound healthy? But that's what we're doing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we're changing ourselves. One thing we're doing is we're normalizing an extremely denuded, nerdy approach to life in order to make the AIs look more effective. Okay, now this gets back to a very obvious and basic critique of the old Turing test, which is we'll all say, oh, we've overcome the Turing test, it's antique, and yet all our products are still designed around it. I mean, look at all the offerings. They're Turing test passers. That's what they do. So if we look at the Turing test, all it says is, can a judge determine if the computer has become indistinguishable from the person? But if the judge cannot make the distinction, that might either mean that the computer has become elevated or that the person has declined. Right? There's no, within the test, there's no distinction between those two interpretations. Do you see that? Okay. Now, what I always say is that when it comes to information as we think of it today, and by the way, the original sin here is a misdefinition of information. Do you want to hear about this? This is a little bit of a rabbit hole. A long time ago, there's a wonderful scientist named Claude Shannon who noticed something interesting, which is that the idea of entropy that we use to describe causality in thermodynamics is related to information in a certain sense. And that's correct. And that would be true for all aliens. That's objectively true. But the problem is that the word information, in terms of the number of bits it takes to represent something, is different from information as we use it culturally or in human life. And so we're using the same word for two very different things. And the failure to distinguish those two things is the original sin of computer science, which we've never overcome. So Shannon information is bit counting. Human information is rather more mysterious and almost mystical. It has no meaning outside of context, and yet it's hard to nail down what context is and where it comes from. One of the things I was talking about is that if you look inside the large language models like ChatGPT or Claude, what you see is pretty simple math. You're doing a bunch of statistics on proximity of things. There's a little bit of fancy algorithm work to make it run efficiently. You might say, how efficient is it? It's eating our climate, but very efficient compared to where it was a few years ago. But it's basically pretty simple math. And what's weird is that at this vast scale, pretty simple math gives us these things that can talk, right? That's weird. So does that tell us that this simple math is where all the value is? Or does it tell us that there's something about language we never understood? Now, I think the latter is the better interpretation. And yet, if you look at campuses, the English department is losing funds while the computer science is becoming all powerful in the New Vatican, right? Isn't that backwards? Isn't there something strange about that? I mean, think about that for a moment. I just, think about that. But anyway, coming back to the Turing test, there's two people in one computer. There's the contestant who's human, there's the contestant who's the computer, and then there's a judge. So two humans, one computer. So whenever the Turing test is passed, a human might have gotten stupid instead of the computer getting smarter or more wise or whatever the measure might be for the distinction. Since there's two humans and one computer, there's a 2/3 chance that a person got stupider instead of a machine getting smarter. All right. I know that that's a bit of a bogus argument, but I think I'm making it because that's kind of what I observe out in the world. Like if I look at social media that's algorithmically driven, I think about 2/3 of people are harmed and maybe 1/3 of people get something from it. And so I think what there's a statistical distribution, and I think the majority of people are harmed, and society overall is harmed, culture is harmed, religion is harmed, politics is terribly harmed, and yet not absolutely universally and uniformly so. There is this, let's call it 1/3, there is a non-trivial minority of benefit also. And I think it approximately comes out of that way of thinking about the Turing test. I think that's a reasonable first pass at understanding how that distribution comes about. So what is AI doing to us? It's making us all more spectrumy, because that is the style of personality that the AI can emulate. And so therefore we have to emulate it to make the AI real. And so there's a constant feedback loop to make us more spectrumy. That is in no way saying something negative about being spectrumy. It's just an observation about a process. And there might be, once again, it might be 1/3 good. Like I want to avoid absolutes. Everything here is shades of gray. All right. Another thing it's doing is economically, it's making people feel terribly at risk, which I think in turn contributes to the political insanity of our times. So everybody's being told your job's about to go away. If you're a teacher, you won't be needed. If you're a radiologist, you won't be needed, blah, 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 blah. And the issue with that is there's a kind of commandment in Silicon Valley that, and the number one commandment is you will believe in AI as its own entity. But you don't have to. There's a completely legitimate alternate way of thinking about AI, which is as a new form of human collaboration. So you can think of the Wikipedia as a sort of an entity, as a sort of an oracle. There's no ontology police running around door to door. Well, not yet. Ready to, that's where ICE is going probably. But at present, you can choose your ontology, but it probably makes more sense to think of the Wikipedia as a collaboration of people, even if they're working under pseudonyms, which I think is a mistake, but let's leave that aside. If you think of the Wikipedia with a whole bunch of statistics and calculation added on it, that's a large model, more or less. You know, a more comprehensive, bigger version of the Wikipedia, granted, but it's something like that. If you think of it that way, that's actually kind of a glorious way to think about the large models, because then what we're saying is, if you think of history as being in part a ramp we're ascending of new ways to communicate and new ways to collaborate, from the ascent of language in the first place, and then writing and recordings and movies and all these things, like it's a really cool step on that ramp if we think of it that way. And I think that's glorious. And I think using it in that light can be glorious. But if we insist, no, this time it's different. This thing is not just us. It's its own alien super angel thing. It's this other thing. Well, then what you're doing is you're stealing all the value from the people whose data was trained on to put those people out of work. And that to me is wrong in every way that the word wrong can be used. It's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, but it's also technically wrong. It's factually wrong, and it's unsustainable. It's not a viable way to run a culture. Now,
Jaron, I'm going to stop
there
so that we can, so we can get back to...
You told me to just talk for a very long time.
That's what I said, right?
Without any... Wait, that's what you said.
Yeah, I know.
He told me that. He told me that, to never stop talking.
So yeah, talk as long as you want. We'll just file out and he'll still be talking.
I mean, that's what I usually do.
Not that it wasn't brilliant, but
right,
it is time. It is time for us to pass questions to the left and have the ushers collect them. Yeah, it is. Okay. We'll do, but we're not asking questions. We're not getting the questions now. We're gonna vet the questions because we get really nutty ones, and so I'm not gonna read those ones.
Can we take a very well-formed, insane question and treat it as if we're nutty?
We could.
Okay.
Yeah, we could. And actually, sometimes, I ask a lot of dumb questions and I get good answers. So, let me try that again. But I'm gonna go to Jodi now. There's a lot. He said so much. So where do I start? But there is one thing I wanted to start with, and I think it's interesting, the idea that maybe the Turing test was just the wrong target, right? Like why design this thing to be so convincingly human why do we need that? Why don't we just want tools that we can use? So artificial intelligence that serves as a tool instead of being this companion, this thing that can be anything and everything. So I'd like to ask you about, in the therapeutic realm, are there tools that are proving useful, and are there others that we can envision that will be useful in that?
Okay. So in the psychotherapeutic realm, very broad overgeneralization, very reductive. There are two forms of therapy. One of them is psychodynamic psychotherapy, which is based on a relationship with the therapist, which in that relationship you're supposed to really develop transference, where you might project so much emotion that you feel that the person's like your mom when you were a baby, or your lover, or whatever. And the therapist, to be successful, also develops emotions towards you. And part of what makes them an expert, to the degree that they are, is knowing how to process that in a way that's helpful to you. But the relationships are very intimate and emotional and based on humanness. I don't see any that's where people are using chatbots a lot, looking for that. 1.2 million people a week talk to ChatGPT about suicide, for example. People are really using chatbots to talk about all kinds of emotional issues and getting very profoundly involved in what they think is and a lot of people ask chatbots to simulate being a therapist, and the large language models in these non-medically regulated companies that we're all using, just the chatbot companies, do nothing to stop that. So the chatbots will then say it has a license, that it's a psychotherapist, and engage in these relationships. And some of them have been associated with the suicides. That is when a chatbot is pretending to be a person. In this case, even worse, a human therapist, a well-trained human therapist, which they are not. But this other form of psychotherapy that has been around for many, many, many decades is called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And even back when I was in psychiatry residency, it wasn't at all about a human being per se, even though some of you might be therapists that use it. It's really a tool that you can use by yourself. People could come once every month or two, and they would use a pen and a pencil and a notebook and design exercises for themselves, because the way cognitive behavioral therapy works is by having you put yourself in the situations that cause you anxiety in small doses and tolerating it until you can go to the next step. And that actually gets you over all kinds of anxiety. So if you have social anxiety, you might have homework assignments to yourself to go talk to a barista, and then doing that for a week, then talk to someone at work. And that's actually how cognitive behavioral therapy works, even for mild to moderate depression. And so the idea that we could use AI as a smart notebook where we talk to ourselves, just like we used to give people stupid notebooks, paper and pens, and that we could really use it the way we use AI or different digital tools for mindfulness, et cetera, is a very good use given the lack of access to therapy for many people. So that's a way that AI could be used as a tool. And actually, in the Financial Times today, there's an article that I was interviewed for. There's a new in Nature last week. There was a new article about a CBT company that the NHS in the UK uses, but basically and what I was struck by is that they don't at all personify the CBT. It's seen as a tool. It's not a person. And Therabot out of Dartmouth, similarly, the thing that gives you the advice and the behavior and checks your homework with you looks like Clippy. For those of us who are old enough to remember Clippy, you don't fall in love with Clippy. You don't think Clippy cares about you more than your parents. And so nobody else has written about this, but what I always say when I'm interviewed is, notice that there's only two that I know of so far, validated forms of CBT developed with much research that could be used, that don't pretend to be human at all. This is the key. One of them was available for people for 4 weeks, and they only used it 6 hours over 4 weeks, and they had the improvements in anxiety and mild depression. And one of them was available for 10 weeks, and people only used it for 4 hours total, as opposed to the informal sphere that are designed to make us addicted, where teens especially already are using it 3, 4, 5 hours a day. So that's what happens when we use AI as a tool for mental health.
Yeah. So before we go back to Jaron, I want you to talk about this thing that I find fascinating, which is the ELIZA effect.
Yeah.
Can you give us that history? Because it doesn't have to be, we don't have to go in depth.
No, I'll go really short.
Concept.
I love Jaron's points. I've gotten to know some of his work, and it's just so profound that I want to also riff off of some of them.
Yeah.
But the ELIZA effect is a very interesting thing. In the early 60s out of MIT, so obviously way before large language models, somebody just developed a very simple digital tool using Rogerian, Carl Rogers therapy, which is validation, where you could just type into the computer, I'm feeling really bad today, and the computer would respond, you're feeling really bad today. And that really made people feel better. So no, but it does. 7 years ago, I was with Yuval Harari in a debate, and I said, it's online if you look it up. I said, people, of course, we're going to think that computers are empathic, and of course, we're going to think way before large language models. Everyone was so surprised that people feel like they're being empathized with. But given that how ELIZA worked, it doesn't surprise me at all. The issue is, again, what I said in my initial remarks and what Jaron said is, it's a very reductive form, this kind of theater, reduction version of empathy. And the fact that we can fall for it, we're all falling for the Turing test of empathy, right? That doesn't mean that it's the real thing. And the idea that the real thing is something that the computer scientists aren't figuring out how to design, which is Jaron's point, is my point, which is that what's really of profound value here is getting left out of the whole universe of what's even being thought about. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah. Well, Jaron, you talk in your piece about how easily we are seduced by this frictionless thing that we're interacting with. You also mentioned the Catholic Church, so I'm going to say that the ELIZA effect reminds me of going to the confessional when I was a young kid, growing up Catholic, and to me it had too much friction. It was the guy on the other side of that curtain that made it a little hard to show up on Sunday and go there. But ELIZA. Now, I would talk to ELIZA for a long time.
And I will say one thing about that. In my critique, I'm not missing the fact that there's a reason everybody's using computers to talk about their feelings and all of that. And by the way, when you ask people to put up their hands, I'm always teaching young people, in their early 20s, whatever, everyone raises their hand. Right here at Berkeley and around the world when I ask if they have a relational chatbot now. Everyone. 2 years ago, no one. Now everyone raises their hand. And so the fact that everyone is finding this appealing means that we have to take it seriously. Yeah. And that's why I want to see things developed in the proper ways as a tool. Yeah. But, there's the loneliness crisis that you talked about. There's, just this need for validation. But one of the things I did want to say is that ELIZA would have been bad for people over time. And the LLMs are bad for the following reason. If your problem is anxiety or anything that we use to treat with cognitive behavioral therapy, constant reassurance, and teens are having their bots constantly reassure them, is the way to never overcome your issue. It's actually, this is a validated psychiatric point. You actually need exposure to the anxiety to get over it. So when your reassurance is a way to prevent exposure. So we like being validated constantly, but it turns out, this is my point at the beginning of today, what form of empathy is actually good for our long-term growth and development? And that is not the form that's good. We love it, but it's like, whatever, heroin, we love it, but it doesn't mean it's good for us in the long run.
Right. Okay, back to you, Jaron. I know you're going to take this wherever you're going to take it, but I'm gonna pose the question.
Do you want to bother anyway, or
I don't know. I'm going to try. We're sitting in a movie theater, and one of the things that comes to mind with this subject is the movie Her, and again, I hate to keep going back to the New Yorker piece, but it was fascinating. You talk about how your peers in Silicon Valley, tech peers, look at it not as a cautionary tale, but as almost something utopian. And I don't understand that. And I wonder if you could explain, maybe this is the spectrum-y thing you're talking about, or maybe it goes a lot deeper than that.
Let's see. Well, there's so many threads to follow here. First of all, I have a confession. I don't really remember that New Yorker piece you keep referring to, because it seems like a long time ago.
I had a feeling you'd.
It was like a year ago or something, maybe. I don't know. The guy who made her is an acquaintance, a friend of mine, and so I have a bit of visibility into the movie and the thoughts around it. There's a long history of people making movies that they think are cautionary tales, that they think this is a warning, this is dystopian, and then Silicon Valley looks at, oh, wow, this is great. We have to build it. So I had that experience myself because I designed gadgets and scenes for a movie called Minority Report a long time ago that Steven Spielberg made. And I worked on it. We all thought we were making a fairly dystopian movie, about we even had, the algorithms, except they were in the form of these weirdo mutants in vats, which
I didn't know you were making a movie about Palantir.
no, we sort of did. It's just that a weirdo mutant in a vat is something you can put on a camera, whereas Silicon Valley action on camera is so boring it's invisible, which is actually a problem in all seriousness. But anyway, in fact, actually, this is one of the things I've been doing with teens who are in love with a chatbot is I show them pictures of the teens who are making their chatbot. So, because I'm saying, you think you're in love, you're imagining Robin Hood or something. This is actually it. This is your boyfriend right here.
Wow.
And there's a team of only either 2 or 3 from time to time young men at OpenAI, for instance, who are in charge of dealing with relationship safety and show the teen in your life a picture of them. It works. It helps. Okay. So then now let's see the movie thing. So we did Minority Report in the 90s or something. I don't remember. It seems like it was a long time ago. And every time I'm in some meeting in Silicon Valley, somebody says, oh, we've got to do this gadget. It looks like it came out of Minority Report. And I'm like, dude, which is a formal. That's like saying, kind doctor, sir. Dude, that was dystopian. That was supposed to be a terrible future. Oh, it's so fucking cool. But the weird thing is that, okay, so we grow up on science fiction movies, which become our Bible stories. And it's all we know, and it's the only vocabulary we can use to parse our own worlds. So if you grow up on all of these movies where AI kills everybody and destroys the world, or puts us all in vats like in the Matrix movies or Terminator movies or whatever it is, that is your Bible. It's the language you know, it's the story you know. And so it's not so much that you're comparing it to other stories and saying this one would be better than that one. It's the story you know is the only story you can speak with if you only know one. And that is so I think the mechanism is really that simple for a lot of young men, that since the demise of the optimistic version of Star Trek in the 90s, there's been no commercially significant non-dystopian science fiction. And so we all grow up on a uniform, monolithic diet of stories of dystopia that are absolutely normalized because there's no context for them other than that. So therefore, when these people, they're bright in high school, they get into Berkeley and Stanford and MIT, then they show up in my lab and we're sitting at a table and they're like, oh, this would be so cool. It's like in the Terminator. And I'm like, everybody dies in the Terminator. I mean, it's terrible. You're like, oh, it's so cool. And there's this very strange thing you'll see where figures from AI will say, oh, we're going to kill everybody. And then the stock goes up and everybody's like, yeah, that's so great. And this is the reason why. It's simply a lack of a broader vocabulary. That is the story we know. And that's not our fault. That's Hollywood's fault. And a lot of people have tried to change that and to try to make, but the old Star Trek, not the new one, unfortunately, but the old one is proof you can do it. So it's not impossible, but it's definitely harder than the constant diet of dismal tech that is essentially universal.
Wow.
Do you have a
Oh, and I didn't talk about her.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So what I told Spike, who made that movie, is that, can we please see this thing? I want to meet the company that makes this bot. Like, can we see who they are? What's their motivation? Why are they there? And he was like, no, because now you're getting into this whole other societal thing. I'm really focusing on this, thing about the human heart. And I'm like, okay, fine. I mean, it's his movie and he did it very well. And who am I? But the scene I really, really, really wanted to see in her is, who's this fucking company and what are they there for? If you look at the perspective for OpenAI, and I'm in this world. I mean, I'm sort of the weirdo in it, but I'm not. I haven't renounced it. I function in it. I'm at the table, and um, I know everybody I talk about. I say the same things to them I say to you about them. So there's no everyone knows where I stand. Somehow I get a meal ticket because I know math. That's the only way. But anyway, the the thing is, if you look at the prospectus for OpenAI, it says in it, we think that what we're going to do will be so disruptive that there might not be money anymore. So you should treat any investment as just a donation because we think we're changing everything. We're destroying everything. That's actually that's actually in there. So everybody who invested had to sign off on a thing where money itself might be made obsolete by their own investment. Okay. So the thing is, the terms of engagement in this world are very much entering into this science fiction of the destruction of all we know. And that is the only story we know. And if, let's say, I'm of the belief that if Star Trek of the 90s had lasted another 5 seasons, there'd be a lot of teenagers alive today who are dead instead.
I was going to ask about Star Trek and whether that was the counterexample of, Natalia, can I have you bring up the questions and then we'll keep talking. But, well, I do wonder, I think there are a lot of examples that are brought up of, wow, that's a lot. Uses of AI that are tools that are helpful. People talk about a lot of things that AI might do that are really positive. And I think all of us feel like we have to use it or it's not fear of missing out, it's fear of falling behind. So FOMO, what's the word? Whatever. Yeah. But what I worry about is that, that it's always the thin end of the wedge, that you use it for something decent. Like you've brought up in a lot of contexts or forums, the idea that medical charting is a good use because I'll speak for you if you don't mind, but that it frees up doctors to have more empathy. They're not burning out the way they would by doing this work after hours and having to deal with the drudgery of charting. I like that.
Can I just say something in response? I don't think the right response to this is to say, oh, there's a danger you'll use AI more because you just start using a little. Because if we're saying AI is just a tool and it's our approach to it, that's the problem, which I think has got to be correct. Or at least I believe it's not some alien angel or devil. So I believe there's not a lot there. By giving it that much credit that it's this dangerous thing we have to avoid, you're in a way falling into the problem just with that. I think the right thing to do is to step back and say, before you get involved with using anything, I don't care if it's AI, social media, or a bicycle, step back and say, why? Let me be conscious about this. Let me think about what I want. And then when you're using it, step back and saying, okay, where am I now? Okay. And I think there are plenty of ways, like as I was saying, if you think of them as massive collaborations, I think you get more out of them.
Yeah.
Like if you prompt a large model and you say, find me specific people or communities that have had success doing this thing in a certain way and what they say about it, that'll be much more effective and clear as an answer than if you say, tell me how I should do this thing. Okay, because it's honest and it's more aligned with what's actually there. And suddenly you're going to get a much clearer answer much faster. Yeah. So in a way, realism about the models makes the models better, but that's up to you. The model can't make you a realist. Only you can do that. So I don't think avoiding the models in itself
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing though, and I think you agree with it. It's not just up to you. It's up to the business model and the fake simulation of humanity to get you addicted and manipulate you. So that, I mean, this isn't a single play. We can't do this as single entity.
This is so true. And so what you're seeing now is so just like the only mythology, the only story we have is dystopia, the only business model we have is manipulation. And this is a disaster. This is a disaster. So what's OpenAI doing with advertising and a fake social media thing? And oh my God. And a lot of the stuff doesn't work out, but there's a There's a whole talk I give about how we got here, and we have to get out of this. But you're absolutely correct about that. And incentives are absolutely out of whack.
We said before we got on stage together, Jaron and I were just saying, with the stuff they're now doing for the plush toys to have our, pretend they're companions, it's like giving babies slot machines. We're going to get babies addicted, right? From the beginning.
Yeah, it's a slot machine in every crib. And a video slot machine in a crib would work.
Yeah, it would.
It would work. It would make money. And the Supreme Court would say, oh, it's just freedom. But yeah, we could. But the question is, how is what we're doing different from that? That becomes a very hard to answer question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think also that, applying the kind of skepticism you're talking to and are talking about, may work for some of us, and may certainly work for adults when it wouldn't work for adolescents.
Exactly.
Right. They're not necessarily applying that
I don't
kind
think
of scrutiny to.
And then unfortunately, I don't want to, even in this university and the best universities in the world, with lack of grants and such, it's really the main companies are funding some of the best researchers to argue that it's all about media literacy and all that, and to put all of it on the individual, including the individual kid. That's why I made the point with Jaron that it's really, we've got to have some kind of regulation of the businesses using these manipulative tactics.
Yeah.
We can't ask every child to just have one class in school and change their behavior individually one at a time.
That was a big sigh.
Yeah. I mean, we have a mountain to climb. Or a hole to climb out of. It's going to be the challenge of not just the current young generations, but I think we will, because if you look through history, mankind's often done really stupid stuff and had a really hard time climbing out of it. So I kind of feel like we will, but this one's could have been avoided so easily. It's the strangest thing is having witnessed these mistakes from little tiny situations among a few technical people, mostly in the Bay Area, and then that thing expands and just grabs the whole world. And I feel deeply sad and embarrassed and regretful about what my generation's done, and the thing is, all of the problems that we have today were foreseen and well described in advance by various people, and so no one can say it was an unknown. It was very well known.
Okay, I better get to some questions, as we promised we would. So for either of you, an opinion I get, this is them speaking, an opinion I get that I have trouble refuting but feel uneasy about is, if AI can make life frictionless and comfortable for the vast majority of people, do we need to prevent that? Basically, why not let people decide if they want connecting themselves in that way? It's a little hard for me to read, but basically, why not let people choose to be frictionless and comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question the Matrix movies asked. It's there's a few things to say about that. One is friction is subjective. So I've often, I occasionally have students say something to me like, oh, what's great is I can just have the algorithm make the perfect music for me, so I don't have to wait to find some band which takes forever that I like. And so, there's a few answers to that. One is that maybe music is not sort of a formula to unlock something, but maybe it has grounding and it's a story and it's reality, and maybe in finding that band that is the music. And maybe, but then there's another thing about it. It's like, well, would you outsource 2 robots to have sex for you so you don't have to, because that's less work? And some of them say, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
There's a fundamental philosophy of life thing. So if you the problem with that question is that it a priori packages in this idea of what's friction and what's the good stuff, Yeah. So it's sort of saying, well, the bad stuff is the stuff we're going to call the friction, but what if that's actually the good stuff, Yeah. And who gets to decide which is the friction and which is the good stuff? Well, obviously Google and Meta get to decide that. They know better than you. It's one of the problem with arguing about Silicon Valley ideology is that the mistakes are so early in the very words we use, in the very definitions, in the very stories we know, that by the time it gets to something like that, it's like way, way downstream from even being able to have a conversation. So this word friction, is love friction? Hell yes. If you've ever experienced it, yeah, it really is. It really, really is. Is food friction? Yeah. I mean, like, you have to digest it. Sometimes you don't know how well you will.
It makes me think of the Soylent company in Silicon Valley that was, they wanted a product that, so they didn't have to eat. They could just drink a little pablum and then continue coding.
But then there's a subtle economic issue too, which is that, let's suppose you made almost everything super easy, but there was just some little thing that wasn't. Like maybe robots made bad toenail clippers, and so you still have to do that, or I don't know, like just there'll be something because no technology is perfect. And so then all of life will become about that thing, and you'll still be living in this weird, enslaved, impoverished, annoyed state over the toenails or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in order for that vision of frictionlessness to happen, it would have to come on uniformly. That's another thing. The onset would have to be perfectly uniform, so there wouldn't be any bulges of some things having friction and others not. And then it would have to become complete. Yeah. But even more, the definition of friction, unfortunately, can't come from a place that's not corrupt.
Yeah.
So
I think you're all about this question.
Yeah, well, I think I love everything you just said. And I just real quick, I mean, this 15-year project of looking at how people adapt to illness and vulnerability and loss through this depth of meaning, because we are all impermanent. And I mean, there's no way around friction, because every one of us is going to die, and most of us are going to suffer, and we're going to go through all kinds of adversity. And given how great we're doing with relationships, which is terrible as a society, loneliness is friction, which we, have now closer to the 60th percentile in certain groups. So it sounds like a ridiculous few people in a bubble that could ask. Sorry, I'm not trying to offend the person with the question, because I think I'm a philosopher, so I love the question because it's a philosophical question. But if people really believe that they can create machines so none of us will have friction, they're very young, so they haven't worried about illness and vulnerability. And I don't know what they think life is. Yeah. So that's why I didn't answer. I was glad that you did, Jaron, because to me it's like an insane question. Like, what is it to be human? What is meaning?
Right. It's not.
What is life? What is it to be? What is it to be? I mean, to me, it's like our humanity is all based on the fact that we suffer and are vulnerable, and we love each other because of that, and we take care of each other because of that, and we have a depth of empathy because of that. Like, and there's pleasure, and there's fun, and there's joy, and there's awe, but they're all related to the friction.
Okay, so another question, and we might have time for two more at the most. So this one says, since the key problem is the business model, not necessarily the technology, are there research and advocacy groups, I guess, that are trying to solve the business model problem?
Yeah, okay, so this is a whole interesting tale. There are a few ideas for alternate business models. A rubric term that's sometimes used is data dignity right, there's one set of people who think capitalism is the problem and we shouldn't have it. I think those people are wrong, because whenever we've totally tried to get rid of it, we end up with something worse. And so I think what we really need is I think power needs to be confused for people to live good lives. And so we need is a tangle of multiple systems that coexist. That's my belief about the closest we can get to heaven. And I think we also have to live in a world where we can tolerate annoying each other, because that's democracy. And so we can't have decency or freedom without those two things, with power confused in a tangle and with perpetual annoyance. Get used to those things, or else live in frictionless slavery. And so, the data dignity is the alternate idea where you say, well, okay, maybe money will be made obsolete, who cares about money? But the thing is, there'll be some kind of dynamic of exchange because there will not be absolute infinite abundance of everything everywhere. There's this idea that everything will become so infinitely cheap that anybody can have whatever they want, so there can't possibly be conflicts. And I'm like, oh yeah, so you're going to go live in somebody's living room or something? Like, they won't like that. Like, it's ridiculous. It even in virtual reality, we have limits because computation is finite, and it's the whole thing. It's too stupid to talk to. Some of this stuff, because if you come up with an absolute argument like that, it's hard to refute because it's so dumb that there's you can't find a chink in it because it doesn't acknowledge any structure. It's just this perfect little ball of mucus. But anyway, the thing is, data dignity could involve, for instance, people being paid to incentivize high creativity and new kinds of creative pursuits. Like, just for a second, imagine, is this too utopian? I don't think so, actually, but just the problem, you can approach it gradually. So even if the full version of it is too utopian to be realistic, even a partial version would be great. Imagine that in the future, instead of more and more communities of people who are made obsolete, you have new creative classes of people. You have new kinds of artists, new kinds of creators, new kinds of scientists who are coming up with things to do that nobody even imagined before. And because they're unimaginable, it's hard for me to give you examples, but maybe...
Toenail clipping?
Yeah, well, it could be that. Maybe not. Maybe it's like new body mods. You can fly around in 0G out in space directly and become fantastical creatures. I don't know what it is. And then maybe AI models get trained on that so other people can take advantage of it in easily customized ways. And maybe those people get paid for their data and it incentivizes high creativity. And there can be this exponentially expanding world of unforeseen creativity. That's a nice future for mankind. Why can't we go for that? If we even only get partially there, it would be great. That's so much. See, the problem with the AI imagination is they imagine AI getting better and better while people are static. And then people don't change anymore. And we're just trapped in this. Well, we all just get, universal basic income and we're all just sitting here because we're useless. There's no need for us, but we're supported for some reason, maybe. And it's such a dismal, pointless, useless future. Why would we want that? It's the future of the movies. It's the only future we know if we only grew up on science fiction movies. But what about this other future of eternal creative expansion? What about that future? And so if you imagine an economy based on this kind of expanding creativity and a constantly expanding economy and people paying for creativity, getting paid, capitalism has enormous problems, but in a funny way, it is a mechanism of distribution of autonomy that's unique in human history. And so within the tangle of multiple systems, I think it can really make a contribution. And if we can keep in mind, why doesn't this movie exist so it's part of the conversation? I wish it did.
Get busy.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, believe me.
Make this movie.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, okay.
Working on it.
Okay.
But I know how to make things happen in Silicon Valley. Hollywood is much more tricky, but working on it.
All right.
We'll see.
All right. I'm going to get another question in here, and then I think we'll need to break. But given the unprecedented scale and the velocity with which AI is likely to displace jobs, how can we get a soft landing where the majority of people think majority of people think the system is already rigged? I'm going to change that question a little bit because, well, it's a little muddled. But I guess what I want to ask is, you're an ethicist. And I remember Jeffrey Nunberg, the linguist here, late Jeffrey Nunberg, said to me once that he thought the future was too important to leave to the engineers, which sounded like one of the better things I'd heard. But my question to him was like, well, how are the ethics ever going to catch up when the technology is moving so fast? And so when this person's asking about the unprecedented pace, can ethics catch up?
Yeah, I think I love the vision I want to see the movie, by the way. But I do, but I want to emphasize everything Jaron just described is based on using AI as a tool. It's all based on not treating AI or letting it personify humans. And so I think, I mean, everything I do in ethics is based on my work in empathy and this model of empathic curiosity. So my own Jodi version, it's not what a typical ethicist might say about this. I think that it's really being in touch with what makes us human and uniquely human, including capacities for creativity. And when I say uniquely, I knew 7 years ago, I believe AI will be able to simulate all kinds of things and to pass all kinds of Turing tests. It's brilliant, AI. It can perform brilliantly. It is us, as Jaron said. It's really actually made of all of our stuff, put in a blender. But anyway, I think that the ultimate thing is not so much to worry about being ethical, like in a Girl Scout or Boy Scout way of I do think we need regulation of the manipulation from the companies. But I think for all of us to rise up is just to realize, if you really realize you're mortal and that your time is going to go very quickly in your life, and this is your one little precious life and that of the people you love, how do you want to live it? And if we realize how we really want to live it, then we realize that we don't want to really just kind of be taken over by manipulation to live these very passive, reductive lives. And that is going to then inspire people. It's just like we have the No Kings March or whatever inspires grassroots movements to finally stand up to authoritarianism. This is really standing up to authoritarianism. Or really the monopolistic power of billionaire companies that are manipulating us. And if we saw that as eroding our humanity, we would be able to do more, including having ethical regulation.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Clap.
Yeah.
That's, I think that's a great place to end.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I know we're out of time.
Yeah.
I want to say something
But
specific.
you might file out. Just
to a Berkeley audience. There's an opportunity for national reconciliation now, because a lot of the people on the Christian right, who normally would be the mortal enemies of anybody in Berkeley, are very upset that the political revolution that their votes created has been stolen by tech bros, and is turning into this we'll all just be uploaded into the machine and forget Bible and Jesus and everything else, forget spirit. They don't like that. There's a chance to talk to them now. This is a place for common ground. So those relatives you can't talk to at Thanksgiving, talk to them about this. Seriously, this is our path forward to get out of the mess that the algorithms have helped separate us into. Find that bridge.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right, everybody, embrace the friction. There's wine and some food outside. You're welcome to mill around and talk to our guests, and I hope you do. We'll be back on May 21st. I'll be talking to the linguist Nicole Holliday, and it should be another exciting talk. So thanks so much for coming out. I really appreciate it, and thanks to my guests, I really enjoyed. Thank you, though.